Jake Paul did what seasoned fighters spend their whole lives trying to achieve, and he did it without ever chasing a belt. No Olympic background, no years spent in amateur circuits, just raw media momentum, calculated moves, and a knack for controlling the narrative. He wasn't built in gyms. He was built on screens. And somehow, that was enough to change everything. He didn't fight his way into the sport, he finessed it. While others trained in silence, Jake grew loud, controversial, and impossible to ignore. What looked like chaos was actually a plan, and behind the memes, knockouts, and callouts was a business model that flipped the sport on its head. Go back to 2018. Jake Paul wasn't a fighter. He was a prankster, a digital villain, the kind of internet personality older generations dismissed entirely. But he understood something most boxers didn't. Attention wasn't just valuable, it was currency. When Logan Paul stepped into the ring with KSI and turned a YouTube feud into a multi-million-dollar spectacle, Jake took note. The lesson wasn't about boxing skill, it was about pulling focus. Jake didn't start training to be a champion. He trained to be a headline. While purists mocked him, he hit the gym with professionals, learned the basics, and picked his targets with surgical precision. His first professional opponent? Another YouTuber. The fight wasn't about competition, it was about narrative. Jake knocked him out, stood over the body, and let the noise begin. Then came Nate Robinson. Not a fighter, but a recognizable name. The mismatch was obvious, but the knockout made history, at least on the internet. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, ESPN, TikTok. Nate fell face first into the canvas, and Jake fell forward into millions. His payout, including endorsements and PPV shares, crossed the seven-figure line. It wasn't about climbing the ranks, it was about skipping them entirely. Now that the machine was moving, Jake didn't bother with boxing commissions or credibility checks. He focused on building a character, not a boxer, a brand. He launched Prime with his brother. He rolled out MVP promotions to keep full control. He dropped into podcasts, picked public fights with Dana White, and threw shots at the entire UFC ecosystem. He painted himself as the heel of combat sports, the man you love to hate, and it worked. He turned every interview into a storyline, every press conference into a performance, and the whole time in the background, he trained. He didn't need to be the best boxer. He needed to be good enough to win the fights that mattered for the camera. By 2023, Jake had fought and beaten names that carried weight, even if they were past their primes. Tyron Woodley twice, Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz. All of them had real combat credentials. None of them were in their prime. But that didn't matter. The spectacle sold. The Diaz fight alone pulled in over 500,000 PPV buys. Jake's take? Around 10 million once the back end hit. No title, no governing body, just two recognizable names, a media storm, and a ring. It was spectacle disguised as sport, and it sold like crazy. The secret? Jake didn't play the sport, he played the system. While most fighters grind for scraps, Jake came in with leverage. His three biggest tools: attention, ownership, and showmanship. He controlled his fights through his own promotion. He stayed viral between bouts, and he made every card feel like a cultural event. His trash talk channeled Mayweather. His self-promotion mirrored McGregor. And his merch and media strategy could have come out of a rapper's playbook. He didn't just book fights, he booked moments, and audiences couldn't look away. Critics called him a fraud. They said he disrespected the sport, that he was a clown. But the numbers didn't lie. While traditional fighters struggled to fill half an arena, Jake was selling out venues. While they begged for sponsorship deals, he signed multi-million-dollar contracts. He reached younger fans, people who'd never watched boxing until he made it feel like a viral event. And whether purists liked it or not, Jake's fights were talked about, shared, watched, over and over. This wasn't about belts or rankings. It was about relevance, about who could generate the most conversation, who could dominate headlines, who could make people care. Jake Paul understood that in today's world, attention is the real prize. He didn't need the WBC's approval or a top 10 ranking to prove his worth. All he needed was a spotlight, and he knew exactly how to keep it pointed at himself. Traditional fighters spent years chasing titles to validate their careers. Jake bypassed that grind entirely, rewriting the rules by making his persona louder than the titles themselves. He never chased legacy in the way the old guard defines it. He chased leverage. strategic control over his brand, his business, and his story. While others begged promoters for opportunities, Jake created his own ecosystem. He negotiated directly, he cut out middlemen, he sold fights by selling himself. Controversy wasn't a risk, it was the strategy. From beefing with legends to baiting promoters, he made every feud into free marketing. The more people doubted him, the more powerful he became. He didn't just respond to criticism, he monetized it. Every time his name trended, every time a clip of him throwing a punch or calling someone out went viral, Jake Paul grew stronger. For most fighters, pressure is a weight they have to carry. For Jake, it was a springboard. The louder the backlash, the louder the response. He wasn't aiming to go 50-0 like Mayweather. He wasn't chasing textbook footwork or pound-for-pound rankings. He understood his real value wasn't measured in rounds won, but in reactions sparked. The ring was only one part of the show. The real fight, the one that paid, was fought in the algorithm, in headlines, and in conversations happening everywhere from Twitter threads to sports talk panels. He knew how to stay at the center of the noise. One day he was challenging MMA legends. The next day he was dragging promoters, stirring up drama, and selling the next card before the last one even finished. And while the boxing world rolled its eyes, his bank account grew. He wasn't just polarizing, he was calculated. Every move felt chaotic on the surface, but behind it was strategy, timing, and a deep understanding of how modern fame works. It didn't matter who thought he didn't belong. What mattered was that people kept watching. And when you zoom out and look at the numbers, it's impossible to argue with the results. In a fraction of the time, Jake Paul made more money than some fighters do in a lifetime of professional bouts. He didn't need to hold up a championship belt. He held up the playbook for a new kind of fighter. A fighter who wins before the bell even rings. He didn't master the sweet science, but he mastered the business behind it. The optics, the show, the machine. And once he figured that out, everything else was secondary.